Elven High Magic. To summarize the previous video, these are rituals designed to redirect the underlying magical energy en masse, to bypass the inherent processing rules of the weave and manifest magical effects that stay in place for generally a much longer time than traditional spells, producing a much more powerful effect. To compare, rituals of solitude requiring one mage can let an individual turn into a dragon for several minutes. The rituals of complement require 3 channelers and hide an entire city from outsiders. A ritual of myriad requires 5 channelers, backup casters, rituals of purification, and the unification of a ritualist and their people, and it can create buildings of immense size and complexity permanently held aloft by the residual magic regardless of the fantastical shape that it holds. It all seems so amazing, and helpful to both the elven people and the world whenever it's in peril. Why doesn't everyone do it? Because it's really difficult, and it has to go perfectly, because if it doesn't go perfectly according to plan, it can go really wrong. My name is Red No Blue, and today we're going to talk about what it means to be a high elven magic ritualist. We'll discuss the training needed to become a high mage, the abilities conferred upon them, and the risks presented to them every time they attempt a ritual. We'll discuss the ways that they can cast rituals and safeguards that they put in place to protect against mistakes. Finally, if you're lucky, we'll discuss a few comments that took place in the previous video that caused me no small amount of existential terror. Fun, as always, but starting now, since I haven't mentioned it before. If you like what you're hearing and seeing, feel free to subscribe. My new goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of 2020, and I'll need your help to do so. And with the crass commercializing out of the way, high magic grants elves the power to aid the weave by supporting the natural world that sustains it. In return, high magic helps preserve the elves' presence among the mortal realms. High magic helps shape the weave of Toril and concentrate it at various places to create mythals and gates and other great magics. Finally, high magic allows its wielders to experience the joys of the oneness of their eventual afterlife through their links to the weave, as their own abilities and learning prevent them from experiencing it firsthand, forever separating them from their comrades for the good of all. You see, all elves eventually feel the pull of Arvandor, the great afterlife in which all good elves gather in the unity of the Seldarine and their race. That unity, the structural functionalism of being but one voice in a monumental choir, is the call to home that elves eventually hear and give into. But a high mage is a repository of ancient secrets and vast power and must sever that yearning. In creating and directing the vast flow of Akasa, a high mage is subjected to a shadow of that feeling, becoming one whilst within the flow, but losing it as soon as the ritual is complete. While high magic separates an elf from his fellows and severs some of their sacred ties with Arvandor, both the high mage and the elves understand it is for the greater good of both the mage and the community. To become a student of high magic, an elf must have a basic understanding of magic and its related forces. They need to understand that the direction and channeling of magic is something to be discovered from intense theorycrafting and mathemagics. For while one must be in sync with the thoughts and identity of the elven people that they're casting this ritual for, they also need to understand the precise measurements and consequences of the magic that they redirect. This isn't something you can wing, or feel out, or rely on an outsider to do for you. This is something wholly of your design and responsibility. Thus, the elf needs to be a wizard, and only elves of at least 17th level are capable of beginning the study of high magic. The candidate must also be of far sounder health to wield this power than he ever needed for traditional wizard magic, and must be among the more erudite and wise of his race in order to contemplate the powers he may eventually touch. This is in some ways like redirecting a river, but it's also like using a magnifying glass to redirect and focus sunlight. The elf's body is the magnifying glass, and they must be strong enough to not shatter. A certain understanding of elven life and lore, not to mention a sense of maturity, is also necessary for this education. Therefore, the earliest age at which elves are allowed to begin studying high magic is 450 years. No matter how talented the pupil, a high mage will always tell an impatient elf the same thing. You prove yourself unworthy by the very asking. Your impatience betrays an Telquest-like predilection for rushing into things, rather than accepting life and the weave as it is. If you cannot learn the patience to wait until we determine your candidacy, You shall never find the patience necessary to learn high magic. One so rash and querulous should never touch the weave at all. Basically every declining letter that you've ever received from a university. Prerequisite stats for being a high mage are a constitution of 12, wisdom and intelligence of 18, 450 years old, wizard level 17 or higher. Please note, this type of magic should be available to NPCs only, as the rituals within are campaign breaking for players to utilize and just don't work for the type of temperament that player adventurers generally have. High mages have to see the big picture, and aren't caught up in their own dramas and personal issues. If a party requests that Elven high magic be utilized to remove the wards from a high level dungeon, the high net mage needs to be able to say no. The intention of Elven high magic is to add something greater than the players, and more enigmatic, to both your campaign world and to their adventures, without it being written off as just another bad guy ability. Just as they are separated from their comrades for their training in wizardly magic, a student of high magic must undertake a voluntary apprenticeship to a high mage, who must be at least 900 years old. This apprenticeship lasts for approximately 75 years, though it can last longer. Sometimes the apprenticeship can last 100 years or more, especially if the applicant is a multiclasser. Their apprentices are going to be working alongside their masters eventually, and high magic will fail catastrophically if the ritual is tainted by the concept of master or apprentice. All must be equal, no hierarchy, no thought of greater experience. Everything equal. And it can take a long time to get someone to that level of competency, yet humility. While the finer points of a high mage's education are cloaked in secrecy, enough elves have witnessed some of the practices of apprenticeship to get a broad view of the elements of training. Open secret, remember? Students are taught meditative techniques to allow themselves to more readily feel, see, and sense the weave around and within them. In essence, the apprenticeship teaches the students to look beyond the physical world without the use of spells or other devices. The ability lies in many an elf, but those with the industry to learn wizardry do not necessarily have the diligence to sit patiently and learn to see what the weave teaches them unconsciously every day. The elven high mages know that magic is energy, part of the existing spectrum of energy that exists in any world but removed from the material world by intent. They know it's real, as do we all, by the fact that they're all wizards, but it's an energy that does not require magical spells to activate. Do not try to bend the spoon, that's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth. A caster is a part of the natural world, and it can be detected and interacted with while bypassing the spells and weave rules that magic is usually bound to, because we're also part of that same natural world. By concentrating on the flow of water, an elf can learn how and where it moves, what forces are at play within it, and how any intervention affects that flow. Once students master that, they learn the same about wood smoke, meditating in a smoke lodge for months or years at a time until they can track the tiniest cinder into the sky above the trees. By the time a student learns to see the flow of incense, then wind, then heat, they begin to see hints of the weave. Students then learn to focus on the sun, moon, and other celestial bodies. They study each in turn, watching them rise and set, following the flow of light, energy, and the many forces sent forth by each in succession. Elves are taught to detect, recognize, and see the natural forces of kinetic energy of water, then of air, then thermal energy, until they can follow the gravitational energies of entire celestial bodies, energy so subtle and immense that it should be beyond the sight of ordinary mortals. And over this time they may start seeing glimpses of the weave and the underlying akasa, something that is more invisible than air, more subtle than the predetermined wheelings of distant stars, and they begin to sense their place in it, able to see the eddies their every action causes, the rising and falling of the tides with their every word and spell, the immense power hidden just under the surface of reality. By the time an elf has endured 40 to 60 years of training, they may begin to learn the practice of patterns that are the rituals of high magic. The teaching of these rituals is an intensely guarded secret, though the performance of them is not, since they are obvious in effect once begun. Apparently more magic is always inherent in the ritual than is visible or understandable to non-casters. There are hints that the things learned in the latter half of apprenticeships are such secrets as true names of animals and folk, the location of places of power across Toril, and ways to unravel wizard magic after it is cast, rather than preparing counterspells ahead of time. Upon the completion of their training, they are formally welcomed with a private celebration with their other high mage contemporaries. I imagine there's socializing, music, food, and at least 3 cakes from the baked goods section of the closest supermarket from those mages who completely forgot it was happening despite being told every day for the last week. No, I'm not projecting. What are you talking about? I know what I'm talking about. The induction ritual. Every high mage is inducted through a ceremony that cements them forevermore as a high mage and removes the call to Arvandor. The side effect of that ritual is they lose a bit of their mortality, and their life expectancy increases by 1d6 times 100 years. All high mages gain the ability to detect magic at will, and this is a non-magical ability. Which doesn't actually matter if they're subjected to an anti-magic zone, then they're not exactly going to be detecting anything anyway. They're able to identify any magic of 2 schools upon induction, and learn an additional 2 schools for every 100 years thereafter that they survive. They also gain the True Sight ability, able to perceive illusions and invisible creatures for what they really are. If a mage wants to memorize and cast the boring wizard spells, their greater connection to the weave means that creatures save against them with disadvantage. And because they understand that magic everywhere is connected as a field of complete energy, they can add their age and feat to the range of their spells and abilities. Imagine a Wizard 17 Rogue 3 with range Legerdemain out to 470 feet away. The main drawback, however, is that high magic doesn't react well with spell magic. Perhaps because spell magic concentrates a caster until it disperses, whereas high magic just redirects the greater flows of a caster. Or perhaps it's because high magic must ignore the rules of the weave that spell magic must adhere to. Or perhaps it's because spell magic memorization is inherently selfish, and high magic must be selfless. Whatever the reason, if spells are memorized, a high mage cannot use high magic rituals until they have completed 10 full days of self-reflection and meditation. This limitation applies to scrolls also, but not magical items such as staves or rings. Thus, most high mages will have a plethora of magical items on their person at all times. High mage rituals are taught to a high mage during their training in order for them to be able to practice something, but the focus of magic through their physical frames is so strenuous that they can only do so once per 10 day to begin with, and even then can only attempt the solitary rituals. Complement and myriad rituals can take 500 to 600 more years before they can be attempted, and when just starting out they can perform perhaps only 1 myriad ritual once every 5 years. Remember, a caster when collected and concentrated will often manifest, and the easiest manifestation and cantrip to learn is usually Firebolt. It's why Fireball is so OP at 3rd level, because it is the easiest element to manifest. High mages who have attempted to cast more than the recommended number of rituals in their time frame, whether out of pride or necessity, have died. One Elven legend titled The Phoenix Rises Over Kaisar Vale tells of a high mage who attempted one too many solitude rituals to bring relief to her veil, and, even when tapped for small effects, the weave proved too much for her, and she burst into flames, becoming a great bird of fire that flew aloft and burned into nothingness. Castus's folly caused the death of Mistral and a temporary explosive sundering of the weave. With the ascension of Mystra as the goddess of magic, the weave remains intact, though pollution remains within it, and it has been weakened by the human's dabbling. With this disruption of the planet's lifeblood, tapping directly into these powers becomes dangerous. Consequences of high magic corruption are rare as long as the mages stay within the timeframes of use, but when they do happen the results can be catastrophic. For a time the results of corruption were improving as Mystra and her chosen began cleansing the weave, however the chaos of the spell plague has undone most of that good work. Although Mystra's resurrection and reforming of the magical rules has made things more stable again, the corruption of chaos is a constant worry in the back of every high mage's mind. Corruption's effects include, but are so not limited to, the caster losing a point of intelligence, the caster aging 2d 100 years and falling into a 10-day coma, the caster losing 1d20 hit points permanently, the caster losing all access to both high and spell magics permanently, or the caster dying as a 20-charge retribution strike and being reborn immediately as a banshee or lich. In order to reduce the threat of corruption and the interruption of those who would wish the high magic fail, traditional wards are set up as part of the opening ritual. The high mage cleanses and purifies the site where the casting will occur. This defines a boundary or ward surrounding the caster and most often the target as well. The greater the casting, the wider the cumulative ward radius surrounding the casters, 10-foot radius per caster involved, although those wards don't impede casters within a ritual. The invisible ward prevents all interruption and intrusions, physical, magical, psionic, or other, within the area of casting that are not part of the casting itself, such as supporters lending mental energy. The ward disappears at the end of a ritual. For physical intrusion, a 50-foot long 20d6 arcane bolt, similar to a lightning bolt with no resistances available against it, rebounds from the point of contact straight back along the contact trajectory, accounting for missiles. If any physical body actually touches or penetrates the ward, with a body part or with a handheld weapon, the above damage hits the intruder and throws him 1d20 feet outside the ward. With magical intrusion, such as casting a spell through the wards, attempting to magically pass through wards through teleportation, etc., the magical intrusion is instantly traced back to the caster, via emanations in the weave, and the caster, whether an actual caster or an item wielder, is subject to an imprisonment spell. Mental or other intrusions, ethereal, astral, psionic, etc., the intruder, or the caster of the intrusion, is subject to a trap of the soul spell effect, and the intruder is either absorbed into a small gem created instantly by the ward magic, or into the high mage's cell kiru, which is a type of lore gem which holds all of the knowledge, seeing as the elf is going to be living for so long. Newly created gems float in the air within the ward and zip unerringly into the hands of the primary caster upon cessation of the ritual. Unsure what happens if there's a retribution strike or something bad happens to the caster. I guess you're just stuck forever. Only a wish spell or other high magic casting can bypass the wards without consequence. While many high magics remain to sustain the glories of the Elven realms, many more have been lost over time. Legends speak of magics unknown, or at least hidden today. Elven high mages could shatter godly avatars by speaking the true name of the god in ritual with intonations that could disconnect it from the weave, something which only Mistra should be able to do. A high mage could summon destructive power equivalent to that which created the High Moor. The ritual is known as Mormaor Sokeralor, the Killing Storm. Most elves refer to this high magic ritual of Myriad as Mayarita's Bane. The High Moor is enough mute evidence to illustrate that this magic is not to be summoned ever again. In fact, the elves scrupulously pay attention to the talk of wizards in Faerun. When even a hint has emerged of a mage considering a killing storm, that mage is found dead within a 10-day, and his books and notes of such magic destroyed irrevocably. Despite the secrecy, a number of high magic effects have been duplicated, at least superficially, as traditional wizard spells. The effects are roughly the same, though any high mage or chosen can perceive the subtle differences in both the way the magic is woven and the true effects of the spells. It is possible, but not proven, that the epic spells of previous ages have had their roots in now forgotten high magic rituals. Similarly, the ability to channel small amounts of a caster a set number of times per day. Doesn't that sound familiar to the magics of high mages? These spells bypass the chaos of the spell-plagued weave. Perhaps spells of the Fourth Age are proto-high mage spells. Finally, I had a real fun time reading the comments of the previous video, and none gave me more horror than the few people who asked me, red, or blue I guess, if high magic relies upon the full unity of community and self, what about hive-mind creatures such as mind flayers? Could they use high magic? Needless to say, I laughed, then stopped. My eyes grew wide at the possibilities, and suddenly I had to find out for the sake of Faerun and the multiverse, and so I turned to the most experty expert on all those topics. So there you have it. It would be easy to say that the Elder Brain supersedes all other thought, but the magic runs through each participant of the community on a mental and spiritual level. Each Mind Flayer belongs to a hierarchical choir of thought and there lacks the balance of equality for the high magic to function. I think we, and every sentient being, can breathe a sigh of relief. Thank you, High Mage Greenwood. Coming up next, we start the discussion into the inevitable result of high magic, the semi-conscious, semi-sentient magical fields, mythals.